Hi everyone, welcome back to Race to the Top with me, Oke Eleazu. In today's episode, we'll be talking to Becky Royle about renting VHSs, her dad's Ford Capri, and being an ethical headhunter. I felt enlightened at the end of our conversation, and I hope you do too. Right, let's get into this. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Actually, for anyone who doesn't know, what does a search firm do, and where does the term headhunters come from?
It sounds quite barbaric,
Yeah,
doesn't it?
yeah, I know. Well, it probably was.
It probably, sometimes can be.
Yes. Yeah, for those of there's a lot of people listening thinking it is barbaric. It's absolutely barbaric.
So, executive search. So we are there to find the most senior executive and non-executive leaders. So it could be C-suites, chairs, board members. I am a small spoke in a very big wheel.
Yeah.
We cover all parts of UK PLC, but also we're a global firm as well. So there's no part of the UK we don't touch really.
So, but what do you actually do?
So you're taking away the mystique here.
Well, I'm trying to get into we know that your job and people like you, your job is to hire the top people in the country.
Yes.
And so if I want to be the top people in the country, I'm interested in what you do.
Absolutely. I mean, look, when I started this job back in the days of yore, you used to take out an eighth of a page in the Sunday Times.
That's right.
And cross your fingers and pray that the
And now
right
that's like
person
2
would see
pages.
it. Absolutely. You would pray that the right person would see it at the right time. That's gone now. This is about proactively identifying and reaching out to the best talent in the UK and internationally as well for a given brief. It's very nuanced. It takes a great deal of time. So for me, a typical assignment will take 10 to 12 weeks for one appointment, unless it's board build, which is slightly different. So it's about relationships. It's about a bit of matchmaking. So what's the culture and ethos of that organisation and the skill set they need? How do I find them?
Yep.
You know, we may headhunt you one day. I'm sure we will. But we will have built a relationship over a period of time.
Or may have already done.
I can neither confirm nor deny that. But we will make sure we're building relationships. So when the right opportunity comes around, we're approaching the right people.
So if I think I'm doing a pretty good job somewhere and no one's calling me, does that mean I'm not top talent?
No, not necessarily. I mean, I think there's the beauty of my job is I still meet new people every day, and that's wonderful, isn't it? You know, there is talent out there. Some people are slightly more extroverted in terms of sharing their successes and their capabilities. Some don't realise that they're top talent, actually. And, that, you know, the beauty of my job is I interview people, and I can always say to them, that's one of the best interviews I've done in the last year for this type of role. And it blows their mind. They don't realise. And I think that's really interesting because it suggests they're perhaps not being championed within their own organisation. So there's kind of a root cause issue there. But yeah, we unearth new talent every day. And it's joyful.
Yeah. I mean, something maybe we'll touch on later. I mean, the reason for the questions is that, you know, we know that there aren't enough people of colour in top leadership roles, yet there are some people doing great work somewhere else. Should they just cross their fingers and hope to be called by Becky, or should they be promoting themselves more vociferously on LinkedIn and things like that?
So LinkedIn is an amazing tool. It's become more and more important over the last few years, I would say. I would say, yes, do market yourselves, but don't over-egg it. You know, they become those people who just become a brand. And actually, what we're really interested in is what are your key achievements? What are the tangible, measurable outcomes of what you've done in your career that we're really impressed by? Of course, you need to be a people person. That's a big part of leadership. So I would say, yes, get yourself out there a little bit, but also we could probably talk about allyship later.
Yeah.
You need your internal champions to kind of help you on that journey. Make sure you've got external mentors because, you know, we reach out to so many mentors as sources saying, you know, who's out there who we should be having a relationship with and engaging with. So it's more calculated, I suppose, but please don't over-egg it on LinkedIn because you might get muted.
Yeah, no, it's fair enough. Anyway, that was a little bit of a rabbit hole, but hey, a good one and some great advice, and I'm sure that a lot of people would appreciate it. So, actually, though, we want to talk about you, all right? Not just as a headhunter, you as a person, and how you got to how you achieved what you've achieved. So, if we start at the beginning, what was it like growing up? Now I get confused. Shropshire, Liverpool. Explain your growing up.
I'll give you a whistle-stop
Yeah,
tour of the
please
UK,
do.
shall I?
Yeah.
So I was born in the Wirral. So I was one of the last babies born at Clatterbridge Hospital.
All right.
To single mother, white mother, black absentee father.
Okay.
And then my mum met my wonderful dad, dad, when I was about 2.5 years old.
All right.
So I grew up in an all-white family, which is really interesting. And I suspect I'm probably not the first person you've spoken to.
No, you're
with
not.
That kind of background.
But you know the heritage of your father and
And my wider family.
Okay,
They're
great.
All in my back garden yesterday.
Oh, right.
Do you know where I live?
Unbelievable.
Yes, but that's an interesting topic in and of itself. So we moved.
And is that African or is it Caribbean?
Caribbean.
Okay.
Yeah, so Jamaican.
Okay.
But I was kind of reflecting with my mom yesterday, and I think one of the more interesting elements of me growing up is that I'm a child of social mobility.
Okay.
So when I was young, my dad used to sell Hoovers at the back of his Ford Capri.
Nice. What a great car. Bring back Ford
Great
Capris.
car, great Hoovers.
Great. I'm not sure about the Hoovers, but definitely bring back Ford Capris.
I mean, they're just beautiful, aren't they? Until both got stolen.
All right.
At the back of a petrol station. And then he moved into IT. We moved down to Telford in Shropshire, the land of the dual carriageway and roundabout.
Yes.
Lovely place. And kind of as I got older, I think I noticed that the houses got a little bit bigger. The holidays went international, and we lived a very comfortable life. That in stark contrast to the early years. I mean, my mum was working in a petrol station, renting out videotapes. And I remember one of the things we were talking about is I was kind of tucked away behind the desk late at night because there was no one to look after me. So we had those kind of quite tough times.
Yeah.
And then the really nice as well. And I think that's really important because it means you're forever grateful.
Yeah.
You never forget those formative years.
Do you look back with fond? I mean, because when you're a young child, a lot of this stuff is just you growing up. It's just normal, right?
Yeah. I do think of it fondly, actually, because I'm really passionate about social mobility. I think it's really interesting because when you look at kind of lower socioeconomic demographics, the sense of community is much greater. And I can see how that has been lost as we have kind of become, middle class, I suppose.
Yeah.
So I do look back on it fondly. I mean, you dramatise everything, don't you, when you're a child?
Yes.
And I remember, one walk home from the garage late at night, which in my head was about 4 hours, and it was 2 blocks away. All of that stuff. But again, that's still a really fond memory.
Yeah.
But we all think that of our youth, I think, don't we?
Yeah. Well, I don't suppose we all do, but I think that your point about social mobility and communities is a really valid one. How everyone looks after each other. You know, I've done a lot of work, as you know, in the social housing sector, and you see that and you feel it and you sense that community spirit that when you go into much more middle class environments seems to not disappear but dissipate a little bit more.
Yeah, and it's a bit keeping up with the Joneses, and I think that's a real shame, actually.
Yeah,
it is a real shame.
Yeah. So was that lots of different schools? Because you've moved around a little bit.
Yeah, they say pretty stable. So I think I was probably about 7 or 8 when I moved down to Shropshire.
Okay.
Down to Telford. And then I had kind of a straight shot through in school. I mean, it was the most undiverse place you've ever been.
What, Shropshire?
In Telford, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it was me and a guy called Utanica who made up the sum of the diversity at my whole school. It was interesting, isn't it? Because we were kind of lumped together and we couldn't have been more different as human beings.
Yes.
Then it's this whole, BAME piece. It's just lumping people together, which I thought was quite interesting. But, I was in a very white family, in a white community, in a white school. So actually, half of me was never really nurtured and acknowledged, I suppose.
How did that work with your sense of identity then?
Oh, really good question. So there's a brilliant author called Afua Hirsch, who did a book called Blackish.
Yes, I've heard of it.
And it's fascinating because it talks about, you're not really acknowledged and accepted by black communities, but neither white communities as well. So you're this own demographic in the middle. And I think it does affect you, actually, but not so much at home. So when I was at home, it wasn't really talked about. I was just one of 2 children, and I've got my amazing sister, Sally. And
by the way, Sally, full sister or half sister?
Half sister. Okay. So same mum, different dad. So that's really interesting because it wasn't talked about. And because it wasn't talked about, I wasn't othered. Yeah. So it was just Becky, the person.
Yes.
And I think that's actually been really important for me in shaping who I am now. Conversely, you could say, actually, I missed out because I didn't have that cultural heritage. And, there's still so much I like about black culture, not least the music.
Yeah.
Which tells me it comes from within, doesn't it? You don't teach that.
Yeah.
It just kind of happens to you.
That's really interesting. So you feel that's like a nature thing, the love of, I suppose it's rhythmic music, 'cause that's what people call black, music, rather than a nurture thing.
I don't know, but
But you're an interesting experiment in that, right?
I suppose I am. And a really nice example of that is all of my friends used to go clubbing at the weekend, and they were really into dance music. So, it was glow sticks and day glow outfits. But I would always want to go somewhere different. So I always used to drive to a place called the Reynolds Bar in Stafford, and they used to just play the most phenomenal music. Me and another girlfriend who really liked it. And I always felt culturally I was going off in this slightly different direction.
When you say amazing music, what was that?
Oh, it was your old school R&B.
Oh, right, okay.
Bit of Joe, bit of Jodeci.
So what they call the classified black music.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely, 100%. But I never, did I not grow up around it? I mean, my mum was relatively into, the classics, the Earth, Wind and Fires of this world.
Brilliant, legendary, We all love a bit of Earth and Fire.
We love it. We love the onesies. So, I suppose there is a little bit of nature in there.
Yeah.
I suppose.
But was there? So I find that super interesting because when I was a young kid growing up in a predominantly schooling white environment, although at home in a very mixed environment, I was doing the opposite. It was almost code switching back then. So I wanted to like New Romantics and what would predominantly called white music, pop music, and really shunned black music because I didn't want to be stereotyped. But you seem to have gone the other way. Yeah,
it's just like something that I loved so much. I mean, I'm still a bit of an indie girl as well.
All right,
I do love my indie music. But yeah, I just loved it. Like,
you didn't worry about being stereotyped. Oh, hey, you're a person of colour. Of course, you would like R&B and hip hop and.
Yeah, I suppose there is a little bit, but it's not quite in the microaggression space, is it? And I've had some shocking microaggressions as I've been growing up.
Yeah.
It's something to be proud of. It's the best music. It is the best music.
Obviously, that other musics do exist, but
musics are available.
The other musics are available, and all are brilliant. Let me just say, we are totally open on this podcast about music. But yeah, I love hip hop and R&B. Anyway. So, okay, that's a part of that shaping.
Yep.
How else did being a person of colour in a really predominantly, in a white family, let alone in a white neighbourhood, how did that shape you?
Well, because I think my parents didn't even really mention it at home when I was just a person.
Yeah.
Not profoundly. I don't have a big chip
not at
on
home.
my shoulder. Not at home. I think I'm quite stubborn. I think everyone would say I'm quite stubborn and quite resilient. And I think I've probably got this this thing in me where I've always wanted to be the best at everything.
Okay.
And I don't know where that comes from.
So also competitive.
Super competitive. I mean, never get me into a board game.
All right.
But then my sister's the same.
Did that mean that loads of the Monopoly games ended with the board just not being there anymore?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, don't get me started on Scrabble. We'd have full-on family fights because we'd use the 1988 dictionary.
Oh, dictionary. Oh,
Yeah.
right. Okay.
Yeah. But I think that's kind of just what we're like as a family.
Yeah.
So what was the question? How does it
shape
me?
So, you're
it
not
made
in your
me-
home environment,
Yeah.
but outside your home environment.
Yeah. So I think there was that wanting, I think, people to see that you can be good if you're mixed race.
Yeah.
So, I couldn't just play netball. I had to play netball for Shropshire in
Yeah.
the England trials.
Yeah.
I didn't just sing. I was in the Shropshire Youth Choir.
All right.
At work, I was the youngest partner. I've always had this drive in me.
Yeah.
And I suppose a streak of independence and kind of looking after myself. And if you want to get it done, do it yourself.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably how it shaped me.
And do you think that's
a little bit.
so that drive and independence and competitiveness and all of that, is that a feature of being a person of colour in a white environment, or would it never have? You'd basically always been those things. Those things haven't created the drive. If you see what I mean?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's my colour. I think it's that I'm a child of social mobility.
Right.
So it's kind of been drummed into. I was literally kicked out into work at 15 years and 9 months old.
Right.
And I've worked in factories. I've worked in cake shops. I've worked in shoe shops. I've done everything. But you always work and you always work hard to get ahead. That's just what my mum and dad just instilled in me.
So I was going to say, so if it's not the race and it's social mobility, and there's no chip on the shoulder from race, what are you trying to prove? What's the race? Because a lot of people, the race is driving them. I want to show that I can be X, and you're doing it from a social mobility perspective.
Yeah.
What are you trying to prove? What are you trying
I
to?
don't think I'm trying to prove anything.
Okay.
I think there's something about being independently successful
Okay.
and not relying on anything. I think that's probably who I am. And, my friends, my family would tell you I'm fiercely independent, perhaps too much at times, and that's probably a date with a psychologist, isn't it?
We don't do that here.
We'll not go deep today.
Well, no, we'll go deep, but we'll go where we like.
Yeah, but I think that's it. I think there's some interesting psychology in fiercely independent humans, like self-protectionism, like I don't need anyone else. Where does that come from?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So yeah, I would say it's probably the social mobility more than the blackness. As I was younger, slightly more evident as I got older.
Yeah. So it's really interesting when we talk to people, and when I started this, I talked to people about this whole thing about parents, what your parents tell you about how your future's going to be, right? So mine were, you're going to have to be better, you're going to work twice as hard, you're going to do all of that, and that was that they just said that, right? Just be ready to do that. Ready to be brilliant, undeniably better than everyone else, right? Because if you're not like that, then you're just going to get messed up in the wash, right? And then that could count for every child, by the way, not just me.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in what your parents told you, especially because they might not know. So both my parents are immigrants coming from Nigeria, so they know, dude, you're going to have to put it in. You're going to have to put a shift in to get to the top. Your parents may not have known that, so I'm really interested to know what they told you.
So they didn't tell me anything like that.
Right.
And I'm probably going to sound quite controversial now.
Go for it.
So strap in. I think there is quite a dangerous narrative that comes from black parents saying to their black children, you have to work twice as hard to get ahead. I think it plants things like, if you didn't get the job, it's because you're black. And actually, it takes away a resilience from the individual that actually you just weren't good enough or you just weren't the right person. It gives you that very easy fallback. And my urge to parents out there is to just start shifting that narrative, because I think it can be quite problematic.
Okay, to what? Shifting it to what?
Good question. I mean, I think everybody has to work hard to get ahead. I mean, we've all seen the impact of, the Nepo baby and privilege. and how that plays out. That is a thing. That's always going to be a thing. But there are lots of other people who have different levels of advantage and manage to get ahead. And I think that's probably the narrative I would like to see more, not you're black, therefore you need to work twice as hard, because I didn't have that. That came from, I don't know, something else within.
So do you think that's not true? Pretty fundamental point for this podcast.
Yeah, it is. I think it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
That question. Do you think it's not true?
Not in entirety.
Right.
Yeah. I think, you can't just look at one organisation. There's so many different shapes, sizes of organisations, different cultures, different professions as well. And it would be foolish of me to sit here as a headhunter saying, every organisation behaves in exactly the same way, because they don't. There are absolutely organisations out there who will say, we'd like someone who's black, but we'd like them to sound white, talk posh, and dress in a certain way.
Yeah. But they would never say that. But that's what they mean, is what you say.
That's where we're getting at, isn't it? It's what we want. I would never be in an organisation like that. So there's something about pick your environment. Where do you think you can thrive? Because that cultural alignment is so important. Because, I've seen people stay in organisations for a few months and leave because there's been organ rejection. That's a very real thing.
Yeah.
Now, that's been black people, Asian people, white people, LGBTQ+, people from all walks of life. So that's why I'm saying the narrative that it's just because you're black is dangerous. And it could be for any myriad reasons. But of course it's there in some environments.
Yeah, it must be. And it's, I've thought a lot about this, because even in pre-interviewing people for the podcast, I ask this question a lot, because I think it's really, really fundamentally important, to how we program our children, who are going to be the next generation of leaders. And there's got to be an element for me that says it's not going to be easy, but it's not easy for everyone, right? But actually, if you can give of your best, it's not, you have to work, because it's not twice or three times or four times. It's actually do the best and be the best that you can be. And if you do that, you've got a good shot, right? Yeah. But I suppose what my parents were telling me was just don't be in the pack, right? Because if you're in the pack, you're probably not going to get the job, or you're not going to get the promotion, or you're not going to get selected for the development course. Or if you can show yourself to be right at the top end, then you've got a much better chance, which is just obvious, right?
Yeah, but that must take a toll on one's mental health and that sense of identity. Because, I know you often ask people about, do you bring your authentic self to work? Should you? I think everyone should bring their authentic self. I'm not necessarily sure people should bring their whole self, because that's a whole HR issue waiting to happen.
Yeah, God, yeah. I always think that.
But your whole thing about, the pack, that suggests that you're not bringing your whole self and you're not bringing your authentic self. And that takes a toll as the months and the years wear on, when you're putting on a mask, you're being someone else to get through. I'm unashamedly my authentic self. I've been for years. Perhaps wasn't when I started. And that's how you get ahead. And also, people need to have someone to look up to. And they have to say that, actually, I don't need to speak that way, dress that way. When they look up, they see someone who was like they were, or who's like they're going to be in 20 years' time. Yeah. And that's really important. I never had that. I had amazing allies, but I did not have, someone mixed race or black who I could look to.
Yeah, role modelling is pretty much fundamental, and understanding who you need to be. I mean, it's like the whole element of code switching, and where people of colour try to be someone they're not to fit in. Yeah. And I get that, like 100%, because that's effectively what I was saying with the music before. I was like, I need to fit in, right? And I'm definitely different. So how can I do other things to make me the same? And I think it's a real tough balancing act, isn't it? Between wanting to feel like you belong or you'll be accepted, so you have to behave in a certain way, from being the true person that you are. Yep. And I think everyone's got to make some sort of value judgments in the margin somewhere.
I think that's right, but it's the environment you choose to be in. Everyone's got a choice as to what organisations they target to go and work for.
Yeah.
And I think that makes the world of difference. You know, I couldn't even imagine being in an organisation where I had to behave in a certain way just to survive. It feels pretty shocking to me, actually.
But is that because you're a headhunter? So you think people go around targeting organisations and doing things like that, when actually generally they just want a job, right? And so
Yeah.
certainly I can only talk for myself, but it was I like that job, and then I find out a little bit more about the company, and I didn't go. I won't go and work in these 5 companies because they're like this. Yeah. I just go for a job because it'd be a great job for me to do. So I wonder if you have a different perception about how people go to find jobs.
Yeah, I mean, and you're right. I kind of have the luxury of I see hundreds of different types and flavours, shapes, sizes of organisation every day.
Yeah.
Whereas, some leaders have only been in 2 or 3 organisations and that is their norm. What if I've learned anything? There is no norm. They're all so unique and wonderfully so. I think you do need to have real clarity about the right kind of organisation for you. So, what's going to make you thrive, where you're going to feel comfortable. Because I think only when you've got that can you be really good at that job that it is you want to do. And you only really want to do it if you're right in the right organisation. You want the best for things you like, right?
Yeah.
So I think there is something about sitting and having clarity about the type of organisation that you want to be in. Or certainly if they're not there now, what journey are they on?
Yeah.
My company, I've stayed there for 15 years. It's because it's evolved, it's shifted, it's grown. I mean, the demographic of the leadership team is completely different to when I got there. And it wasn't there, but I could see it shifting. And I thought, actually, I really want to be part of this. I want to be part of the force for good. And I think I'm going to have a voice here. And I have had. And that's been the joy. I didn't think, I want to be head of central government and housing. I never even thought of it. But because I'm proud to lead in that organisation, that's what led to wider opportunities.
So let's keep going down this route, because I'm really interested in how would you know that, right? Because I've worked in lots of big organisations, and what they say and what they are is often for mine, not night and day, but I've seen other organisations that are night and day. In fact, in this space, people will say, we are striving to do this, we are doing this, we're doing that. It's in all the websites and stuff, and you get there, it's just no different. So how should someone go about really finding out what that organisation is really like?
Yeah. So this might sound a bit trite, but, your gut is your second brain. Every time people don't work out and they leave, I should have trusted my gut. I should have listened to it. Because instinctively the things that you're being told aren't right. I would love someone to say to me, we are absolutely shocking at this. Let us learn from you. We need to get better. And I would know, actually, they're being really honest. They're not sitting there going, oh my God, we're great. We're doing really good. We want to do more. So I'd say make sure you've got a really clear evidence base as well. So if they're saying they're doing wonderful things, where's the data?
Yeah.
I think one of the most powerful things is, people by people, right? There's no point, and I've kind of got this with my senior leader hat on in terms of the people who we place. There's no point just meeting the board, because the board are not the reflection of the culture of the organisation. There's no point meeting the exco and just having those. Because actually, you don't know who's on their way out. You don't know who's been there forever and isn't really performing. You don't know who's considered to be part of the future. So I would say splice right down through that organisation. So I work with lots of housing associations, as you know. So when I do chief exec appointments, the shortlist meet with customers. They meet with people who are out in the repairs and maintenance van every day, in the call centre, in L&D, as well as the exec, as well as the board. And I always say, when a process gets to shortlist, that's when it really flips, because it's as much about that organisation selling themselves to you as it is you assuring them that you're the right person to take on that role as well. And that's the kind of mentality you need to go in. So you're doing your due diligence at all levels, and you'll come away thinking, I've got a really good feeling about this, or there's some stuff that just isn't ringing true. Yeah. It is absolutely within your gift to interrogate that and test it. I think everyone has one bad move in their career.
At least one.
Yeah, but at the least one, you're right. And that's okay. And oftentimes it's because people didn't do the due diligence, and didn't trust that gut.
Yeah. Or people are really good at creating it. Well, actually, when you talk about the level of due diligence you talked about, you're less likely to have that happen. But
Exactly.
most people don't do that. So they sort of meet the people they need to meet. They do 2 interviews. They know what's going around a little bit. I mean, Glassdoor helps now. Gives you some sort of other sort of perspective that might be from internal people who had no voice before. So, it's, but you're saying look around.
Look around. And also, if you're going to go really deep on the due diligence, get on LinkedIn, contact someone who used to work there at a senior level, because they're going to be the most honest.
Yeah, that's true.
They've got no skin in the game, and they'll give you that objective view as well.
That's good. Just before we move on, and we've done a lot of career stuff, I kind of want to just go back to this, because I'm always really, really keen for when people have been successful to ask them, what are you thankful your parents taught you or told you? What are you thankful now that your parents told you or taught you when you were a kid?
So my parents were quite hands-off, actually, when it came to career. So I was the first one to go to university. And I really wanted that for myself, so therefore they wanted that for me. I think they probably always taught me to stay true to my personal value set and my integrity. And actually, I think that's probably absolutely critical in the job that I do every day. We could be in a world where I just wanted a bum on a seat so I can take my fee, but I don't have that in my DNA. And I think you'll find that's the same for lots of good headhunters, all good headhunters. So that's just stay true to yourself has been really important.
All right, okay. Yeah. An ethical, you heard it here first, an ethical headhunter. Because you agree that, I've been a very senior person. A lot of people, my colleagues, speak positively about all headhunters. And I think that's for the reason you've just said, which it doesn't always feel like those people have your best interest in heart. They have their own best interest in heart, and the money and the commission and all of that stuff.
Yeah, and it's very short-sighted. I'm acutely aware every day that I am having a massive impact on people's lives. If I don't feel comfortable with an organisation or a candidate, they have to know about it, because it could be, a bit of a fatal move for one or the other or both.
Yeah,
so it's my job to help people navigate through that. So it's not just a chess game.
Are the only successful headhunters ethical ones?
Yes.
You think so?
Absolutely, because I think you get found out, don't you? At some point,
headhunting
is about so much more than putting a bum on a seat.
Yeah.
It's making sure that they integrate into the organisation. It's checking in that they're okay. It's helping them with any mentoring that they need. So the relationship doesn't end once the contract is signed. It's kind of incumbent on us to make sure we maintain that relationship. And sometimes we communicate sensitive stuff between employer and individual at that kind of 3 or 6 month mark.
Yeah.
Which I think adds real value. So I think done well. I think I've got the best job in the world. I absolutely love my job.
Brilliant.
But there's a lot of responsibility, and that's kind of a privilege, I think.
So how did you get into it? How did you end up being a search selection headhunter? Call it what you like.
I didn't wake up one morning and say, "Mom and Dad, guess what I'm going to be when I grow up."
What did you say you wanted to be when you grow up?
I don't know. I was asking them this question yesterday. I don't know. I think I probably wanted to be a vet at some point because I'm obsessed with animals. Nice. But then one of my friends said to me the other day, who is a vet, you spend most of your life putting the thing you love down and putting them to sleep.
I know so much about it. It's very, very tough.
Of course.
Tough job.
Yeah. So I'm kind of glad I didn't. But I studied social psychology at university.
At Sheffield?
Sheffield Hallam. Yeah, not the posh one.
How was that?
It was all right. I mean, if I had my time again, I would have gone to a different university.
Right.
I just feel like I didn't really find my people.
All right. It's because they weren't there?
They weren't there.
All right.
They'd gone somewhere else.
Oh, right.
I didn't know where. And I probably got one good friend from uni.
Okay.
My close friends are from netball or school even.
Okay.
We've got a really tight group who've all known each other since we were 11, and we all live within, 3 miles of each other in South East London, despite growing up in Shropshire.
Oh wow!
There's a level of needy, isn't there?
Oh god, yeah.
Yeah, but they like family.
Okay.
Which is grand. So I studied social psychology. Got really interested in group communication, interpersonal dynamics, all of that stuff, and didn't really know what to do after university. Saw a job with a big global search firm, and took a punt. There were 150 applicants. I didn't get the job. I came second, and we must talk about coming second.
Yeah, did lots of people come second? But don't worry.
Exactly, not a thing. But I actually did come second on this occasion, and the guy got a job in the US instead. So right. I ended up getting it. And I think headhunting is something people do when they finish uni until they decide what they want to be when they grow up.
Yeah, I've always thought that.
Yeah.
All the friends who ended up doing that kind of fell in. It's a very similar story to yours.
Absolutely. But I was just captivated by it from day one.
Right.
Because what a privilege to speak to some of the most senior people in UK PLC, and they want to have a conversation with you. And I just thought it was fascinating, and realised very quickly if you kind of dig your heels in and learn and grow, then you can make a really beautiful career out of it. Yeah, and it's wonderful. I mean, you kind of know you've got to the right kind of place where you have chief execs calling you for your advice. Yeah. Rather than me reaching out saying, "Would you like a job?"
Yeah.
So that's.
But that's a lot of you and your personal brand and what you've built, right?
I would hope so.
Yeah.
I would hope so. And I think it is that integrity piece. Everyone knows I'll always be honest and be helpful. I only want the best for them and their organisation.
Yeah. So what have been the most significant steps in this career? So, you've been in this career, hopped around careers, but you've got, not everyone gets to where you've got to. So what were the most significant steps in achieving that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I was thinking about this yesterday. A lot of it has been down to my own personal consistency and having kind of a clear path. But I would say my move to Odgers 15 years ago was quite pivotal. Right. So I took a step down a level.
Okay.
Because I was going from a national public sector specialist search firm to a big global. Yeah. And I took a step back.
Does that also mean less money or just less? Okay.
More money.
Okay. So it's kind of a step up in a way financially.
I mean, it was fine. It's just one of those things. And it was important for me because it felt like a reset. Yeah. It was like, this is me setting myself in a big global firm. I'm here kind of for the long term. 15 years is a long time to be in an organisation. But I think...
Which is normally what you tell other people.
Yeah. So don't do what I did.
Yeah, exactly. 15 years? You've been there 15 years. What about ambition?
Risk averse. Risk averse.
Exactly.
But I have had lots of opportunities in the organisation as well. So, I was running a practice from a fairly young age. I was given lots of space to try new things. Okay. And they paid off.
All right.
Which is good. So I've set up a couple of different practices from nothing. And that's been kind of joyful. And it is because I was given that space. Say, go do it. If it doesn't work, fail fast, put it in a box and learn from it. I went to business school for a year with a small cohort of people. I was allowed to do my job from the north until I defected to the south 6 years ago. Which is probably the best thing I did actually for my career. It's a shame, isn't it? We talk about, leveling up and being able to work from anywhere. But actually, the hub for us as a firm has been London, certainly for the sectors I work in, central government as well.
But also housing, which is nationwide, but you're still sort of saying London is...
Yeah, housing is nationwide, and I do spend a lot of time in hotels at the moment and on trains. But it's nice now because I'm going to see clients and I'm not just travelling home for hours, which is what I used to do. So I'd say, the biggest things for me were the consistency and being given the space to grow, but also having a boss who at the time I think was probably the biggest ally and the best ally one could have hoped for.
All right.
But also someone who was very, very honest with me. So I remember being furious with him when he held me back for promotion to partner.
Oh, right. Okay.
For 18 months because he didn't think I was ready. But now looking back, he was absolutely right.
Because you hear that term "not ready yet" a lot. Correct in your
absolutely right.
Okay.
Absolutely right. You know, as viewers, you want to go for this once. So you have to be 100% there. You have to be doing it, basically.
Yeah.
And I kind of agree with that. I
Right.
didn't then. I was livid. But yeah, I absolutely agree with him. So someone who is there to champion you, push you forward, but only at the right time.
Right.
And make sure you're equipped with all the things you need so you do succeed.
So because we're going to talk about sponsorship and mentorship and allyship, slightly different stuff. But what you're sort of saying is you need someone who's really almost brutally honest to sort of say, you're actually not ready. But if you listen to me, this will work out.
Yeah.
How do you know to trust them? That they're right and you're wrong? Because when someone tells you you're not ready yet, you're always like, I am ready.
Well, we all think we're ready.
You know, exactly.
Yeah.
So how do you know that they're right and you're wrong?
I mean, he was a very experienced leader. He was a very kind, compassionate individual.
Yeah.
And I think when you've got that compassion in a leader, you trust them and you trust their judgment. And of course, you know, I had a little cry at the time when he told me, and I was angry. Probably became petulant teenage Becky.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was right. He was right. I went for it and I got it at the right time.
Right.
Yeah. And
History's told you he was right, but you might have also been wrong. You might have been, because you've done it.
I don't think I would have been ready.
You don't think? Okay.
No, I think it would have been a stretch.
Okay.
At the time. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I mean, there's a wider question, isn't there, for all of us, which is, you know, do you have to be ready? I think about this a lot when I'm hiring people.
Yep.
You know, do they have to be actually ready, or are they so talented that they maybe not ready now, but they'll make it?
Yeah.
And with the right, I always think, with the right person helping them and leading them and the right scaffolding around them, they will make it. So this concept of you have to be ready is right, but not 100% right.
I completely agree. Yeah, I think it's a brilliant observation. So, I mean, for me, you know, a partnership means a certain thing in a sales environment and a maturity, a strategic partnering externally. I think you do have to be doing it. However, in lots of my clients, I love a stretch candidate. I love someone who's a wild card, who's not quite there, but if they've got the right people infrastructure around them, so, you know, if they've got a peer group who are more experienced, who will help them, if they've got a chief exec who's invested, if they will get them a mentor and a really structured program, then absolutely, you should absolutely do it. I think when an organisation is not performing, it's fragile. When you have a fractious top team or one which isn't fit for purpose for the future, where there's going to be lots of turmoil around them and they need to be the consistent force, I think that's a potential nightmare. Yeah. Actually. So, yeah, I love a stretch candidate. I love a wild card. We're known for it at Odgers.
Oh, good. And so that was a setback. The most significant setback, would you say, of your career? Not being selected for that?
Yeah. I mean, I try not to get maudlin about setbacks. I consider them to be cul-de-sacs.
All right.
So, you know, you have to kind of reverse out and find a different way forward or just realise it isn't the right time.
Yeah.
These things can kind of eat you up a little bit.
Yeah.
I think. So I've been very, very fortunate. You know, I've never had a job I haven't got. Perhaps that's me being risk averse. Eventually. Yeah. But perhaps that's me being risk averse.
Yeah.
And I should be stretching myself, but I'm perfectly happy.
Yeah.
I think I've done all right.
I mean, there's always an adage for everything, isn't there? There's people who say if it doesn't feel uncomfortable, you're not doing it. You're not stretching yourself enough, or if it feels comfortable, you're not stretching yourself enough, and you know you don't know where you sit on it. But you know the reality is, growth comes from lack of comfort, doesn't it? Growth comes from learning new things.
It does, yeah, and that doesn't necessarily have to be in the day job.
No, 100%.
And that's the thing, isn't
Really
it? You are not just your job.
Yes.
And I think I used to be just my job, actually, but I've kind of stretched in a number of different ways in the last couple of years, which is where some of the discomforts come from. My job is tough every day.
Yeah.
It is tough every day. It feels very complex and unnavigable on some days. And I think it's just the right amount of stretch for me. You know, I don't aspire to be a chief exec. I don't aspire to be a COO. It's not my thing. So I'm
It's really hard.
happy. Yeah. Yeah, I've seen that.
It's tough. It's tough. But hey, for another day. Let's think about the last thing on your career, the role of race, because you're so invested in what happens for people of colour generally. Let's bring it back to you. Do you think race has ever been an issue in your career?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think it's affected me significantly, but you see these little micro moves. So have you ever heard of the term the shadow?
Expand.
It's not a WWF.
Yeah, I was going to say. I've heard of it. Is that a film?
Not the Gladiator.
Yeah.
So there is this notion that, you cast a shadow.
Yep.
And the people who are closest to the peak are the people who are the most like you. It's where you get your energy from.
Yeah.
And the further and further you go out, the less like you as a leader those individuals are. They need a little different type of investment. They need a different type of time.
Yeah.
And so on and so forth. I think I was years ago, and this certainly isn't the case now, in an environment, in an organisation where I was right on the edge of that shadow.
Right.
Actually, and I had a leader who was getting their energy from people who were exactly the same as them.
Yeah.
That feels quite isolating, and that speaks to a bad leader, actually.
Yeah.
Not at Odgers, I hasten to say.
Yeah, I'm sure not.
But it does make for a bad leader because they're not actually aware of the impact that giving all of these people that attention has on the person down in the corner who's kind of looking up thinking, why am I not? And that's because, I wasn't posh. I didn't have the pinky ring. I didn't go to, into the army for a few years.
Or the right school or the right university.
Absolutely. So, you do get those cliques. It's like Mean Girls, corporate style.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I think I have.
But
kind
was
of
race
felt
at play
it.
in that?
I'm not sure actually.
Okay.
I'm not sure. It may have been the social mobility thing.
Yeah.
Again.
They're often,
and there's the
massive
gender thing there as well.
Yes, exactly.
It's very hard to separate race from all the other stuff when it's multiple things that make you who you are.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
So yeah, I think I've been pretty fortunate in the round.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're kind of happy with the hand you've been dealt on that front in terms of the role of race. Because some people say, it's had an effect on me. It's actually been good, right? Because I was different, and it meant that I got more attention than I would have done if I hadn't been. So when I ask that question often, people can be negative, but other people can be positive.
Yeah, I think sometimes people expect less of me. I've had a couple, you're quite bright. You think, wow. There's a comment.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, I'm no shrinking violet either. I'm relatively extroverted when I have to be.
Yeah.
So I find my in space and I move into it.
And you get that energy from being around other people.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay then, let's go for the £1 million question, right? Your job is selecting people, right? That's what you have done your whole life, or your career. You are well placed to answer the $1 million question. Is there bias in selection? I'm not saying your selection. I'm not saying you selecting people, but you are around people that select people all the time. Is there bias in selection? And if the answer is yes, how do we address it?
The answer is yes. It is, but not everywhere.
No.
So you're right. I mean, you'd hope I'd have picked up a couple of top tips over the years. If not, we need to have a chat about what I'm going to do next in my career. So look, as I just said, the people who we get on with the most are the ones that are most like us. So we kind of have to start from there and challenging that from the get-go. So if I kind of use a lens of executive and non-executive recruitment, it is my job to make sure that my clients have choice. At long list, at short list stage. If it's not a diverse list, I can't put it forward because I'm not doing my job properly. But similarly, I think my clients have a duty as well. So the question I always ask them is, how diverse is your nominated appointments panel? Because we know statistically you're more likely to make a diverse hire if you've got a diverse panel.
Right.
And if you don't have diversity in that top team, in that nominated appointments panel, how are you going to find it elsewhere in the organisation and pull someone up and give them the opportunity to represent the organisation?
So how can that be fixed though? So sorry to interrupt, but
No, go for it.
on gender, that's much more doable. On race and ethnicity is much more difficult.
Yep, it's not straightforward at all. So that's kind of my point about look further down the organisation. You want someone who you can train up, who can be a voice that is heard authentically, and that's really important as part of that decision making. I've got a brilliant client, and I will name check them because I think they do it beautifully. Homes England, who have colleague panels for all of their senior hires. And they are people who represent different allies groups. So ethnicity, LGBTQ, neurodiversity, social mobility. And they interview all of the candidates and they are brilliant at it.
Yeah.
It's really joyful to see. So even if they don't have, at that top team, they are pulling people who are trained, who are thoughtful, who care about the organisation to be that feed-in mechanism to the final decision-making process.
Yeah.
Also, I think if you've got diverse people, they want to see diverse people in the organisation.
Yeah.
Because to my point before about organ rejection, you need to see people like you. It's really important. So I think that's the first thing. So get a diverse nominated appointments panel. The thing you never want to use is the word fit. They're really good, but they're not the right fit.
Yeah.
We've all heard that.
We all use it, right?
Yeah, I don't.
Well,
it's a catastrophe.
Okay, talk to me about that.
So fit suggests more of the same. And if you have more of the same, where's the diversity? You're not creating a space for diversity. So we always talk about culturally complementary. What is complementary to what you already have in the organisation? What is going to advance you? Look at your strategy 3 to 5 years hence. Tell us what you need. I've seen, some really senior candidates go forward and be kind of discounted on the fit card. And I remember one particular example of an Asian leader being interviewed for a chair position. It's about 4 or 5 years now, and they actually got the job. So it's a good news story. But they had this back and forth about fit. And they couldn't articulate what it was because actually we all knew what it was. Culturally, they felt very different. They felt very uncomfortable. They had a very thick accent that didn't feel comfortable to them as well. And when we actually challenged it, it gave them pause to kind of go away and almost check themselves a little bit. So I get that a lot. And it's the thing I challenge the most, I think. But, similarly, this could be white people from South Africa or whatever who are just culturally different and very to the point and very curt. Doesn't mean they're bad. They've just grown up in a different cultural environment. And how do you create the space for that to work in your organisation?
But that's not always wrong, though, is it? So some people don't fit an organisation. They just don't. No.
But the context in which the word fit is used is really important.
Yeah.
When you know what the subtext is.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I think the other thing from a bias perspective is, sometimes headhunters can be set up to fail. So I'll give you an example. So I get this all the time. We need a non-executive. Brilliant. They need to be really good at construction, development and engineering. Great. We also need diversity. What type? Ethnicity. They need to be quite young as well. And we'd like some women. Now, we know that demographic just doesn't exist in UK PLC. It's just not there. So it's incumbent on us to challenge back and say, but that person isn't there. So we call them pre-mortems. Just making sure that the client's really cited. Again, you'll get headhunters who'll sell their soul and say, yeah, we'll get you 12 of those. And then they, surprise, they fail.
Yeah.
So we try and widen the gate. So we try and think about what good leadership is. So of course you need a skills base in the boardroom, but you need to create space in the boardroom for that diversity as well. So we do lots of, I think it's about 77% of our hires last year were diverse beyond gender. which we're super proud of. And there are mechanisms by which we've achieved that, which I'll talk you through in a minute. But don't be prescriptive in your brief, because then actually you are creating a bias, which means you're not going to achieve what you want to achieve. And people will say, well, there's just no black talent out there, or there's no Asian talent out there. And we know that there is. It's just come up a slightly different route as well. So there's that. And that works really well in terms of shifting some of that bias into a positive.
Yeah.
But then there's something about succession planning. So I always say to my clients, so you've got some internals then. You've got some good, diverse internals. Because actually, people are just assuming that the only solutions are outside their organisation. So why has the employer not grown their own talent? Is there a bias that exists there?
Yeah.
And often the case is, no, we haven't got any talent internally as well. So we do quite a lot of work to co-opt people at more junior levels on the non-executive side to say to the client, here's your opportunity to grow your own. So this is someone who we can see has really high potential. They're going to be on an exco in the next 3 to 5 years. Co-opt them, incubate them at a committee level. And when they are ready, and when you've got a space, you've got your own ready, grown, diverse talent who understands the organisation, who's aligned with your value set, but importantly has got the skill set that you need to go forward. And I'd say that's where lots of our diverse hires are coming from at the moment. And we've got so many good news stories of people who are growing onto boards, and they're wonderful.
So if this is true and you're right, which I'm sure you are, why does this problem exist? So I think you're right, and I'm sure Odgers are amazing, but you're dealing with organisations where selection is an issue, and I've seen many organisations, even in just doing what I've been doing for the last 6 months, where there isn't certainly ethnic diversity down through middle management down to lower levels. So what's the issue there? I mean, there must be an issue more than. So I think you've talked a lot about very senior people, but even just in an organisation.
Yeah. I mean,
what is the root cause? Let's talk about root cause.
Yeah. I mean, look, that senior appointments are my wheelhouse, so I can probably speak less to the middle management bit. So I think there's a few things to think about. One is, do you have a demographic who really do want to be middle senior leaders? Are you getting them in the first place?
Yeah.
We're talking here on the assumption that everyone wants to race to the top. That's not necessarily the case.
Well, the top can also be distance travelled, so can make the best of, make the best of themselves, of what they want to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. And that might not be for some people.
No.
I think the culture of an organisation is really critical. I think, again, we need to look at the multiple sectors that we're talking about.
Yeah.
I've got a colleague, Bob, who works in oil and gas. His the diversity in terms of ethnicity in his organisations is through the roof, but they haven't got any women. Yeah. So they've got different challenges as well. I don't know what the answer is. I think, I'd be a very rich woman if I did know. What I do know is post-George Floyd, I've seen some quite worrying things happen in UK PLC where people have knee-jerked and filled a job with a diverse person and said, God, haven't we done a really good job? We've addressed this problem. Right, what's next? Yeah. Lo and behold, 6 to 12 months later, that individual has left. Yeah. It was a bum on a seat. They didn't think about whether they were complementary stylistically or whether they could even do the job. And then you've got a level of churn. And if people see the churn and they're diverse, they're going to think, well, they're not going to want me. They're not going to keep me. So then people don't go for the jobs. So again, you've got this vicious cycle happening. I don't think there's no one thing. Yeah. I think there are multiple things at play here.
So I'm going to a couple of questions then to sort of bring us home, which is one around you're super experienced. You know what you're talking about. If if someone feels they're reaching a glass ceiling in their career and they may be driven by race, what do you advise them?
That's a really good question. So I think there's a couple of things. Firstly, be honest with yourself. Mm-hmm. Are you at the peak of your career. Is this what you're meant to be? And do it brilliantly, and challenge yourselves outside of the day job.
Yeah.
So not everyone makes it to the top. There's one chief exec, there's one exec director. So think about that. Think about whether you're in the right environment. Are you in the right organisation? You don't have to be there forever.
No.
I've chosen to build just for 15 years.
Yeah.
So have a look out there and see what else there is and what your potential is. On the potential bit, I think it's a brilliant thing to assess your future stretch. So there are brilliant psychometric tools out there who can test, actually, do you benchmark well against your peer group, or have you got more to give? And if you've got more to give, that is your leverage to say to your line manager, chief exec, I want a mentor. This is what science is telling us. How are we going to get us there? And just having that behind you to help you. It may come back and say, you don't have any more stretch in this kind of job. So then you look left and right. You think laterally about what you might do next. And I think a mentor as well. I'm a big proponent of mentors.
Yeah, I was going to ask
therapy.
that. The role of mentors and sponsors, actually all throughout a career. How do you feel about that?
I think it's good. I think reverse mentoring and cross mentoring is better.
Right.
We all see very undiverse top teams, and they've got no real sense of the real world. I think if you can create a really safe environment where you can mentor and be reverse mentored by someone more junior who's a person of colour, if you're a white bloke or a white woman.
Yeah.
If you get that right, I think it's absolutely golden, because it gives you a level of awareness and a level of insight into lived experience that you don't normally have on the day-to-day.
Yeah.
But that trust and safe environment where you can't say you can say bad things, but it's fine because we're all learning.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the only way it works.
Yeah. I talk a lot about scaffolding, and that is mentoring, reverse mentoring, sponsorship, allyship. All of these things help you achieve your objectives more easily. So it's not just an individual pursuit. Being successful is a team game, right?
Yeah, takes a village.
Yeah, 100%. It really does. So I ask, actually, you've been positive, which is great. I think you've been positive about what we need to do to make the change, which I think is the key thing. I don't think you're for a second saying there is no need to make a change, because there most definitely
always need for change.
Absolutely. So I always ask people at the end of the podcast, there's a lot going on. There maybe isn't as much change as we'd like. There aren't enough senior people in roles, and I suppose that's why I'm doing this and all the other things that I'm doing. So can you give us a reason to be hopeful?
That's a good question. A reason to be hopeful. I think things are changing more than you would perhaps see.
Right.
And again, I'm in that privileged position that I get to see across multiple sectors what's happening on a day-to-day basis. But to be patient, because, these shifts are generational. And I think if you go a generation ahead, if we could look into the future, I think we would see yet more positive change. So I think there's lots of reason to be hopeful that things are changing.
Give me a flavour of the things, without saying something you're not allowed to say, but you're privy to lots of things. You're positive. You're seeing generational shifts like 10 years ahead. Is it you're seeing more junior, senior managers? More middle managers, more acceptance of ideas, more organisations being more open to doing things differently, or all of the above?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of multiple things. But I think, if I look across lots of my clients, they've just got these wonderful cultures, very accepting cultures. We've got, there are lots of organisations out there they need to unclench a little bit and realise that there is stuff outside of them. And when they relax and people start to be slightly more authentic in themselves, that creates the environment for diverse talent to come in, but also to flourish as well. So it's definitely shifting. It's definitely shifting.
That's really exciting, the idea that, because I think you're 100% right, this won't work if the cultures don't become accepting. Yep. And if we're seeing cultures becoming more accepted, and then there is a potential for this generational shift down the track because the cult, it's like the concrete's been broken, and then more roses can grow in that concrete because the concrete is the culture, So that is super brilliant reason to be thankful. Well, look, thank you, Becky. This has been super, super brilliant. I think you've given us a real unique perspective and lots of tips, right? What I like about this is in this hour, there's been lots of tips for everyone, right? I include myself, senior leaders, middle leaders, people who are just starting out. You've heard it here first from someone who knows. This is the stuff you need to do to, if not get to the top, to realise your potential. That's what I like to think about, people realising their potential. So thank you for giving us all those tips, things to think about, and being open and honest about your perspective. It's been great having you on the podcast today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.